Hello everyone, and welcome to our Hummingbird watercolor tutorial. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to begin by tracing the hummingbird onto an 8x10 piece of watercolor paper, where I will use a piece of printer paper with my traceable on it, and on the back I will use a graphite pencil just to color in over the image, and then flip the paper around and begin tracing it onto my paper. If you do not have graphite pencils, that's fine. A number 2 pencil will work just as well. So, okay, let's get started.
And then I'm going to, show you guys how to trace it onto my paper. So I'm going to just take my graphite pencil, and it really needs to be sharpened. It's okay. All right, we'll just make do. And I'm just going to really. Let's do this one here. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, just kind of go over my drawing. You don't have to do the whole paper, just where your drawing is. And I'm pressing down pretty hard. Don't do this on top of your watercolor paper. You'll make indents in your paper, and you don't want to do that. Really should have sharpened these. Let's see if I have another one.
You could also use a piece of graphite paper to lay down and then lay your bird over top and trace him that way with the graphite paper. That does leave a darker mark, so you want to press really, really lightly if you use that.
And I really hope you guys enjoyed this workshop today. Okay. So there's my bird. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my HB pencils. You can use a regular pencil for this. You don't have to have fancy pencils. I like my HB pencils because they come in different darknesses. They're my favorite, just the regular HB 1900 series, because it's very light. I can't get very dark with this pencil, and it's just my favorite one to use when I am drawing. And honestly, you do not. The number one pet peeve I have is when I tell people what I do watercolors. They say, "Oh, I don't know how to draw." Well, you don't have to know how to draw to paint, honestly. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of line this up where I would like my bird to be. And because this is not a background, we're not going to have a background for this, or it's not a landscape, I'm going to try to keep it pretty centered. Okay, so I'm just going to hold mine down. You could tape it down if you wanted to. And I'm going to get my eraser, because usually I always need my eraser. At the bottom of my cup. Okay, so I use a kneadable eraser, which I absolutely love. I've had this since I started watercolors. It's like a piece of clay, and it erases really nicely on your watercolor paper without leaving dust, and doesn't mark up your paper or discolor it or anything. My favorite. And sometimes it gets lost here on my table and I get in a panic, because I absolutely love this one. Okay. So what you want to do is you're going to, over top of your watercolor paper, just going to go over your lines. And I'm not pressing really hard because I use 100% cotton paper by Arches, and it's very soft. So I don't want to create indents in my paper. So I'm not going to press down really hard, but I'm going to just put a little bit of pressure to transfer that graphite. But I don't want to put gouges in my paper. I don't want little wells. And if you want to use a different, like a colored pencil, so you'll know which lines you've gone over, that's fine too. I'm not too worried about it. If I miss some, I'll improvise when I do my painting. And another thing, when you are doing watercolors and you have pencil marks on your paper, if you do not want those pencil marks on your paper, I will show you how you can kind of lift them a little bit before you add water or paint over those lines, because once you wet your pencil marks on your paper, you cannot erase them. So just a heads up. I don't mind the pencil lines when I'm doing paintings and I have pencil lines. I don't mind them, but some people are funny about that. They don't want to see them. So I'm just tracing over with a little bit of pressure. And I'm not worried if I, don't get every single one. And I wanted to start with this bird because I think this is going to be the easiest one to do. It's more controlled. Not really getting really loose and expressive with this one. My husband is also home today, so you might hear him too. And then hopefully this is going to transfer over to my watercolor paper, and if it doesn't get really dark, it's okay, because I can always refer back to this. And I'm going to be using a limited painting palette today because I do realize not everybody has paint like I do. I'm a hoarder of paint because you can basically make any color with just your 3 primaries. If that's all you have, red, blue, and yellow, then that's all you need. Okay, let's see how this transferred. Pretty light, but I can see it. I can see it. And what I'm going to do is just make this. I might have missed this big one. Maybe not. Oh, I'm just going to freehand that big one. I don't see that one as well. I do see the rest of them. So I'm just going to freehand my big wing here. I see partial of it. I'm going to just darken some of those. So if you need to, darken some of your, I'm going to kind of go over that one area, this area right here, I hardly see at all. So I'm going to press down a little bit harder. Okay. I just kind of go over it. Just darken it up a bit. And I'm not worried about having it exactly the same. As long as it all connects together at some point. Okay. Just going over my lines a little bit. I see them, but they're very faint. So if you're going to use a graphite, you might want to use the darkest one you can get. And remember, the higher the number, the darker the graphite. You could use a charcoal pencil too. Just charcoal is a mess, so be careful. Be careful with that if you're going to use charcoal. It's kind of messy. Alright, I can pretty much see the rest of this. And then tomorrow we will do birdie number 2. And I'm going to sharpen my graphites for tomorrow, so that hopefully they'll be a little darker. Okay. When I'm doing some kind of really specific drawing, I use a light pad. Just makes it easier. And that's what I mean. You don't have to know how to draw to be able to paint at all. I'm just kind of improvising on some of this drawing here. And erasing any little marks that I see that I don't want. Okay. Alrighty, there we go. Good enough. Now here's another thing. I'm gonna tape down my paper now onto my, this is called a gator board, but you can use whatever type of piece of plywood, cutting board, plastic, hard plastic, anything that you want to tape your paper down. And the reason I tape my paper down not so much for this because I'm not going to be filling this with gushing water and throwing paint everywhere, where I would have to tilt my paper like that. But that's normally the reason that you want to tape your paper down, is so that you don't have to pick your paper up and do all this and maybe get your finger in your paints. You would use your board, and that you can turn it if you need to with your board. Now, a lot of times your paper will kind of warp up a little bit if you're using a ton of water. Perfectly fine, it should dry flat. So I'm not worried about how far up I go because I'm not putting a background here. If I was painting in a background, I would try to only tape my paper to about maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in. That way I don't have a big old white border. So I'm not worried about that because I'm not doing a background on this one. So I can kind of go up a little further. And if you're commenting, I'm sorry, I don't see any comments. So, oh wait, we do. Hold on. Hey, who's here? Hi, Debbie. Hi, Nancy. Yes. Okay, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm looking here and I'm not seeing not one. It doesn't even say anybody's here. Okay, yes, printer paper. For my traceable, I just use printer paper. Yep. How you guys doing? So I'm just taping this down. Man, I'm glad I checked my phone. And there's also a delay with Facebook, so when you comment, if you type something in, I might not see it for 30 seconds or so. So don't think I'm ignoring you, because there's always a delay. Okay, got my paper taped down. Got my rag. I always have 2 containers of clean water. Well, they're not always clean, but I use 2 containers, and I'm using a limited palette here. This is just a plastic butcher tray, and I have 2 different greens on here, a couple yellows, some burnt sienna, a really hot neon-y pink. You don't need to use the same colors I'm using. Just letting you know, you can make this bird whatever colors you like. Okay, it's just basically the value of the color, which means the lightness or the darkness. And the way you get lighter watercolors is by adding more water. Less water, darker pigment. So that's the whole secret here, is the values and the contrasts, which are contrasting colors, which I love because that's what makes your paintings pop. So let's see here. If you look at a color wheel, green and reds are contrasting colors they're opposites on the color wheel. So if I put them next to each other, it helps each one to stand out. Really, really make each other stand out. Orange and blue are contrasting colors on the color wheel. Next to each other, they really pop. If you mix the contrasting colors together, you're going to get a neutral, or it's going to kind of cancel each one out. Yellow and purples are contrasting colors. So you just want to use colors in your bird that are not all the same value, which means the lightness or the darkness, or like you don't want to use like all different blues or greens. You want to use some fun poppy colors. Now, see how I have dark right in there and then right next to light. You usually want to put a dark against a light. So, I mean, it's not always exact light and dark. You can have mid-value against a really dark, light, dark. So that's what helps each one kind of stand out in a painting. And they always say, they always say the contrast, the light and the dark, does all the work for your painting, which makes your painting really stand out in the colors. But the colors get the glory because they're fun. You know, color is fun. So the contrast does the work, but the colors get all the glory. Okay, so I have my bird already. My paper is taped down. And wherever you feel like maybe you have your pencil lines are too dark, just kind of, I just take my, and do this and kind of lifts them a little bit. Because once they're wet, you cannot erase pencil lines once they've gotten wet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a number 8 round brush. So I'm using my silver black velvet. I love these brushes, but it doesn't matter. Whatever brush you have, if you don't have a number 8, use like a number 6 or 4. And I just always think of it as the smaller the brush, the smaller your area. The larger your brush, use it in a large area. And I just realized my big old wing here does not have any drawings in it. So let me quickly draw in some leaves. And I've done this before, so I'm not worried about getting it to be the same. I'll put the flower though. I don't know how I missed that. And watercolors, not like acrylic. You start with your lightest values first and work your way towards your darks. And you really kind of have to have patience with watercolors because it's not one and done. You're going to have to build up your colors sometimes using lots of layers of color. Lots of layers of paint. You have to allow drying time in between. You could dry it with a hair dryer if you wanted, if you don't want to sit around and wait. So it's totally, you know, up to you that way. But you really do. It's not just like you just put on paint and that's done for that area. You have to build up your colors. Okay, so I just added some stuff in there. All right, let me pull my camera down a little bit closer so that you can kind of see a little better here. All right. So what I do like to do first is I'm thinking about, okay, do I want my, okay. Most of the time when I start a painting, I'm sorry, I'm so weird today. I start a painting and I am thinking, do I want it to be a little bit more controlled or do I want it to be a little bit more flowy? Okay, if I'm going to be a little bit more controlled, I'll usually start on dry paper. And then if I want it to be a little bit more controlled or less controlled and more really loose, then I'll use wet paper. I'll wet my paper first. But for this, I'm going to start with dry paper. But I'm going to wet my brush. So I just kind of put it in my water, swish it around first. And then I, tap it, get any excess, blot it. And I've already sprayed my paints. You want to kind of, get them going. Let me do it again because they've been sitting for a minute. Just kind of mist them with a little bit of water just to get them activated a little bit. And I'm going to start here with this, with the body. Let's get a little blue going. I think this is my phthalo blue, or this could be cerulean blue. It doesn't matter. And I just kind of always take it right from my little well here, and just kind of move it around on my palette before I start putting it on my paper. And you know, if you want it to be thinner, watered down, less or lighter, I mean, you just add a little bit more water and it'll lighten it up. You see how really fluidy that is? That's how I like to start mine. I don't like to start with a big thick glob of paint. I like it to be kind of light and loose when I start. So let me just tap off any excess water. Hang on here. My bird is really off. It's really off. As far as my shape, but I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm like missing. Okay. So I have a little bit of blue on my, and I'm just going to start holding my brush kind of like a pen, because when I am trying to be a little bit more controlled in a little smaller spaces, I tend to hold my brush down closer to the bristles. So I'm just going to put in a nice little layer here, and every now and then I'll just put some paint in. I stop, I rinse my brush, blot it, and then I'll go in and just add a little bit of water. If I got too much, I just blot it. You don't want puddles. And I'm just going to go over what's there and push that paint around. And if you wait too long, like if I would have sat here and let that just sit like that, I'm going to get a really hard edge. And I don't want that. So I'm just kind of taking my damp brush and just using what's there right now and pushing that paint around. And I jump around my painting. I jump around because you want to let certain areas dry before you paint right next to them, or they could bleed into each other if you don't let sections dry before you get next to it. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my paint that I have here on my palette. I'm going to drop some in where it's wet already, and then just continue to pull that paint down. Now I might put a different color in here and not just do all blues. So that's why I'm just kind of staying out in this little section right now. You know, you don't have to, if you want to just watch first and paint later, totally up to you. Rinse my brush really good. Blot it off, and I'm going to just soften some of these lines with my damp brush. Okay, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to kind of come down here now. I'm going to let that dry a bit. So I'm not going to do pink like we have in our reference photo, but you can do whatever color you like. I'm going to do a little bit of an orange. Now, I don't have an orange in my palette, but I'm going to make an orange. So I'm going to take a little bit of my sour lemon yellow here. Get it moving on my palette. It's kind of like a gold, so I'm going to use that. And I have my red here, Alizarin Crimson Red. I'm going to mix it with my yellow, and I'm going to make my own orange. And I'm just going to keep mixing until I get what I like. And remember, the more water you add, the lighter it becomes. So I'm going to add some water to lighten it up. Swish it around in there. A little bit more yellow. Okay. So that's what I'm going to use for my tail while that's drying. And what's going to be nice is, this is, well, it's kind of more like a golden yellow, but an orange and blue are contrasting colors. So they're going to be next to each other and really look nice. So I just rinse my brush again, and I'm just using my brush right now to, pull the rest of that paint down. And what's going to happen is, you're going to have lighter areas because you're just introducing more water now instead of more paint. You're going to have lighter areas in each section. Right now this is a little bit darker over here, and later on I'm going to be adding even more, just to kind of darken things up. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit more of that color, and I'm going to go over here to this side, to this portion of his wings, his feathers, I mean. I'm not too concerned about, oh my gosh, I went outside my line. I'm not worried about that. So I put a little bit in, I rinse and blot really good, and then I'm going to just take some water, a damp brush, to kind of pull it down. I like to tell the paint who's boss. I don't let it control me. I control it. See, right now, all these are pretty much light values. And when you do a painting, if it's all light value or all mid value, it's really boring. So that's why you need your lighters and your darks. Hey, Gail. How are ya? And because we are doing this on dry paper, this is going to dry pretty quickly. If my paper was wet first, it would take longer. So I'm going to do my whole tail feathers here in this color, but after they're dry a while, I'll go back in and I'll mix up a little bit darker value and add it. Okay, rinse my brush, and just a damp brush, I'm just pulling this down. If I go too fast, if you're painting with me, or is anyone painting with me? If not, not a biggie. Just kind of blending that all out. Alright, I'm going to come back up to the blue here. This time I'm going to grab a little bit of Ultramarine blue. Just a light wash of Ultramarine blue right now. I'm going to go in this portion of see, I feel like right now I have too much water on my brush, and I don't know if you can see this, but let me show you. So when I get like a little puddle, I can see, can you see that? That to me is an indication I have too much water on my brush. So I'm going to just blot it, get any excess off, and now it's going to absorb that and just kind of pick it up. So it's easier now to kind of spread it. And it's not going to go crazy and go all over the place because it's too wet. So I'm just going to go down now. And just kind of go in this area. And right now everything is very light and kind of boring. Rinse my brush. I'm just going to take a damp brush now. Pull it down. It's kind of like right with this type of bird or with this painting, we're just kind of coloring in the lines. Very, very light right now and boring. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'm going to come back down here because these are pretty much dry already, and go back to my orangey color and just kind of go back up and fill in this portion. And just take your time. Don't try to rush. And if it doesn't work out, oh well, it's just paper. Just remember that. Not every painting has to be a Picasso or a masterpiece. Because every time you lay your brush down, you're learning. And you're figuring out what works best for you. Alright, we're going to let that dry a bit. It's still a little bit damp, but that's alright. I'm going to switch over and I'm going to put a little purple in the center there. And same thing, I'm going to add a little water. Make my purple fairly light wash. Get it going on my palette, rinse, blot my brush, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit. And I'm going to go right here in the center. A little something there. I might paint totally different color. Okay, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. And I'm going to kind of move on up now. Let's see. Yeah, this drawing is completely different. So I have another one here, and I have a third blue on my palette. I'm not even sure what this one is. This might be phthalo blue. So I'll use that. Light wash. But trust me, if you only have one blue, it's fine. If you want to use all the same blue, this is your painting. You make it the way you want. But the only thing is to keep your paintings harmonized. So if I'm using some blues here and some yellows, I want to add it up into this area as well. You don't want to just use one color, one area, and not somewhere else in your painting. You want to kind of keep it harmonized. So you know, just remember that. So whatever I'm using kind of here, I want to kind of use throughout. So I just rinse my brush, damp brush, and just pulling the rest of that paint down. And do you see how Do you see how these are all kind of light? There's no like wow popping out at you. That's really is what is the workhorse of any painting, is the darks and the lights. Okay. Now my drawing is really a lot different from what's going on that traceable, but I'm just going to go with it. So whatever shapes you got going on in your drawing, you just add your colors in however you want. So I'm going to take a little bit of that yellow mixture on my, or that orangey yellowy gold mixture on my palette, and I'm going to make my flower up here, my main flower, that color. So what I'm going to do first is I'm kind of just doing an initial wash, just taking some of that, and I'm going to just let it bleed right into my petals here. That's actually a little too dark, so I'm just going to rinse right now and just use my damp brush and just push that paint all throughout this whole flower, because I'm going to later go back in and add some more dark. So let me get a little bit more. Get my clean water. I'm getting a little green tinge. And if you have to periodically stop, clean your water, do that. So I'm really just taking every petal here and using this orangey yellow color and putting it in this whole flower. All still using my number 8 round brush. You could switch brushes and use a smaller one. So right now that's just a light nothing. It looks like nothing right now because there's no contrast, there's no value change in there. It's just all something light. Okay, let's see. It's not even like the same color. I have a little greenish tinge to it. Alright, I'm going to jump around. I'm going to take a little purple. Still, all this is right now currently is just a light wash of color. And I'm going to, let's see, do this little flower over here with my purple. Now my drawing, if you are doing your traceable just like the one, you know, that I posted here, it's going to look different from mine right now because I did not trace it, or I drew it in, I freehanded a bunch of it in. So it's, you know, don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like mine, honest. So you basically just want to take light washes and go in and fill in your shapes. And remember, don't let, like, if you stop and you don't want that, you don't want that hard edge right there, rinse your brush, blot it, and then just go in with a damp brush. Just soften that up and just pull that paint around. I have such a thing about hard edges. I don't like them, but they are very necessary in paintings. So some of my areas will have a hard edge, but you know, like the inside of a flower to me does not need, or this flower anyway, does not need hard edges. Add a little bit more color. And I'm very intuitive when I paint. I just kind of go with it and feel it, and whatever it needs is what I do. Okay. Kind of come up here. A little bit more. All light washes right now. And if you guys have any questions at any time, just let me know. Just dotting in a little bit of darker right there, so I kind of know where my center is going to be. Water control, knowing how much water to use, how wet your brush needs to be, how wet your paint needs to be is the hardest thing to learn to me in watercolors, and it took me a long time to get it. It really did. So don't get frustrated if it's, you know, if you're doing this and it's not working out for you the first time. Don't get frustrated. All right, let's make up, well, I got a little bit of sap green here, so let me use that. If you need a green, mix a blue and a yellow. If you want more of a bluey green, add more blue. If you want more of a yellowy green, add more yellow. If you don't have purple, red and blue. So let's paint some leaves. This is definitely a controlled painting. I'm going to just lift a little bit of that out. 2-1 value for me. Take a damp brush and I just press down just to remove a little bit of it. Okay, let's make another little leaf. Rinse. And these are so light right now. We are going to be darkening them up. Now, actually, I really am just kind of painting in my own shapes right now. Now another thing you can do, I've not shown you, is that I'll do it over here. So I have some kind of something going on over here. If I want to make these leaf shapes, okay, let's say I want different colors in my leaves. I don't want all the same green or, you know, dark and light of the same color. You can pre-wet the area you want to add your paint. So I'm just going to wet this leafy shape. You can drop in, let's say I'm going to use a little bit of that yellowy orange color. Because my paper now is wet, it's going to help that color bleed out a little bit. You can drop in a little bit of that, and I'm going to drop in a little bit of my green directly over top and let it just mix together right on the paper. Now I know yellow and green go together, they're not going to make mud, so you can also have leaves with different colors in them that, you know, if you want, totally up to you. It can help kind of push it around a little bit. You can add a little bit of blue and green. You know, totally up to you. However you want, however you'd like to do your painting. And I like to do that a lot of times. I like to, you know, have a variety of colors in my paintings. So let me move up here. We'll do this. So I'll show you what this is, what I'm talking about as well. So I'm pre-wetting. You don't want puddles. You just want a nice even sheen of water. If it's too much, blow out your brush and go in with a thirsty brush if you have puddles, just to lift out any excess water. So with this, I'm gonna add a little of my neon-y. I have it, it's called Opera Rose. It's a really, really bright pink. And I'm gonna get it wet on my palette. I don't want it real thick and creamy pasty. So nice and kind of loose on my palette here, watery. And I'm gonna drop that in, just kind of along the edge and let it bleed out. Now if I wanted to, I could add a little yellow to that. I could add a little orange. I could add a little blue. It would make like a violet. You kind of have to know a little bit about color. You don't want to add like a green, because then you're going to get a neutral or muddy. I could add a little red. I have this kind of magenta color here in my palette. I might tap a little bit of that in. But you want to do it before it dries, or see, it's just pretty much going to sit there. It wasn't very, very wet, so I'm going to just take a little water now and help move that. It's going to dry really quick. Now that's just, you know, another way of getting some pretty colors on in your paintings, is by allowing colors to mix together right on the paper. And can you notice right now how light value everything kind of is? It kind of just makes the painting not very, I mean, it's pretty. Pastels, light colors are pretty, but you gotta have some kind of, you gotta have darker values in your paints. You can't just have it be all light, or it's just not as exciting. All right, let's see. I don't like what I have drawn here. So before I wet that, I'm going to change this out a little bit. Remember, once it's wet, you can't erase that pencil line. But you can always change it up if you have not wet it. I have another one of these birds, same drawing, half finished, in my cabinet. I have a lot of half finished paintings. I'm kind of improvising here. Different shapes. Okay. So I'm going to go back up here. This is dry. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a little bit darker value, kind of orange. Let me go in a little bit of my yellow. And the way you make it darker is not as much water. I mean, you need a little bit just to get that painting to move a little. That paint to move. A little bit of my red here. Even add a little bit of this gold. So I'm not going to add as much water, and you can tell it's a little bit darker in value and a little bit more creamier. It's not as moving on my palette. So that's what I'm going to use to start to darken up my little flower up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus. Okay, so I can see my pencil drawing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to go on the outside of that center, the outside of the center, and I'm just going to kind of paint right on the outskirts of my petals, right up to the line. I'm going to add some color, and then I'll show you what's going to happen after that. I'm going to use a smaller brush, actually. I'm going to switch brushes to my number 4 round, and you can use whatever, whatever size you're comfortable with. But I just always like when I'm in a smaller area to use a smaller brush. So wet it, blot, get any excess water off. I'm going to go in and pick up a little bit of paint on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to go in to where I see the my center here, and I'm going to go right on the outskirts of the line. Have your brush wet enough that your paint moves. Okay, right on the outskirts of that line, just like that. And then maybe on the outside of this one. I'm going right up to the line. And then what I do really quickly though, because it's going to dry quick, I rinse my brush and go in with a damp brush and just hit that line a little bit, just to help bleed it out just a little. Okay, I go in again, get a little bit more paint. Now let me try it on a bigger area here. And you can make them as thin or as wide as you want. To make it wider, just press down on your brush a little bit. But I'm just not filling in that whole petal. I'm just staying on the outside of those lines. I'm going to rinse and then go on to the edge of that line. And it just kind of softens it and pulls a little bit of that color down. Now if you're not getting enough, just take a little bit more paint and dot it. Okay, Let me go on the outskirts of this guy, this petal. Just like that. Can you guys see that? Do you want me to lower my phone, my camera down? Let me know. And then I'm going to just take a damp brush. And because we're starting this on dry paper, you got to be quick so it doesn't dry a hard line. If my paper was wet, I'd have a little bit more leeway time. I kind of pretty much erased that. I'm going to go in a little bit more paint. If you need me to move my camera down, just let me know. And I'm going to damp brush, just kind of pull that out. And we're just building up our colors now, our values. I'm going to go on the outskirts of this one. Rinse. And a little bit of water. Do this one. Some I like to have a little bit of a wider line and some a little bit thinner. Now, a lot of times, I just caught it, but a lot of times you'll get water. This is called the ferrule part of your brush. Water beads will be hanging out there, and you'll be painting, all of a sudden, boom, a water bead lands on your painting somewhere, and it creates what we call a bloom. It's like when when you have wet paint that has started to dry a bit, and you introduce more just plain water, it then creates like this cauliflower. So be really careful of that. See, sometimes I get excess water on that portion of my brush and it drips down and you're like, darn. A little bit more paint here. This is a little bit damp still, so just going to darken it up just a bit and then pull it out. Now I'm going to just add some my yellow here because I can. So I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow. So I'm going to just get a little bit of my bright sour lemon here. Yellow. And then a little bit of just yellow in there too. Here and there. Rinse. Blot. And just pull some of that in there. Just for a variety of color. Okay, I think I'll take my yellow and go on the outskirts of this petal. And then damp brush. So we're just building up our values right now. Get some more of my orangey color. Rinse, blot, soften up. Rinse, blot, soften up. And I'm going to just keep working that flower. Letting things dry in between. All right, let's go. I'm going to take a little bit of my cerulean blue from earlier Get a little bit. I'm going to just add whatever kind of shapes I got going here. I'm going to just kind of fill them in. And I kind of do, you know, halfway or so, and then I just take a damp brush and just use water for the rest of the way. And let's do one more right here. And let's pull that blue up here. These little guys. Okay, there's so little that it's, so we're just kind of pulling the paint through our painting so you get color harmony. Now this little area I left open in here, I'm gonna put my green in there. So just get a little bit of that green and just put a little green right in there. Okay, this area, not even sure what it is right now. I'm just going to fill in my shapes. I'm just going to make it pretty with shapes. Let's go with a little bit, well, I'm going to just go with my sour lemon yellow, plain yellow. Get a little water. And I'm just filling in shapes. It's really not even, I don't know what this is, but I'm just filling it in. And purple and yellow are contrasting colors on the color wheel. So they're going to really help each other stand out because they're right next to each other. Especially when I go in and darken out that purple a little bit more. So just a nice, pretty, lemony, sour lemon yellow right there. And I think I'll kind of work on my leaves here a little bit. So I'll go back to my sap green. Get it, you know, fairly loose on my palette. You definitely don't ever want to take a glob of paint and just put it down on your paper. Watercolors I love because one of the reasons I love, they last forever. I mean, you can use a whole tube of paint. It could take years to use the whole tube. And they dry out, but all you have to do is re-wet them to get them going again. So that's the beauty of watercolors, man. They really, you know, they're good. They last a long time. It's not like they dry out and you can't reuse them. So that's a little bit dark, but that's all right. I'm just following my little drawing here. Adding in some green. I love sap green. It's a happy green. And then what I'm going to do is, you know, I'm definitely going to darken up things here on my bird, flowers within my bird. But then in between all this, like I have here on my original one, I'm going to add some very darks to help it all pop in the end. If you want to make your leaves red, make them red. It's your painting. You make them whatever color you like. Now tomorrow's bird, not as controlled as this one. We're gonna Use a little bit more water with that one. All right, I'm going to take pink and put some pink right in there. Some bright pink on these, whatever they are. So this is really just about getting your initial wash in your painting and then going back and darkening some things up, adding in some darker values. So this is the beginning kind of stages of a painting. And trust, when I am rinsing my brush and blotting it, I do it without even thinking sometimes. It's like muscle memory. After a while, it just becomes second nature. Now, if you want to do alternating colors here, it really is up to you. And this video will stay here in the group so you can watch and rewatch as many times as you want. Okay, I'm going to take my orangey color and I'm going to go in. I missed a few petals here. And just add some of that orangey. To my flower. All right, let's come on over and bring them to life a little bit. It always helps when you add the eye. So I'm just going to take, actually he's got kind of a big eye, but it's okay. I'm going to take, here's a way to make it really dark. You can take any complementary colors, so purple, yellow, orange, blue, red, green, and mix them in thicker quantities, not a lot of water, to make a really, really dark value. So I'm just going to use my red and green. And let's put a little over here. Don't need a lot. Rinse and get, I'll take my Hooker's green here to darker green. More red. You want less water when you're making a darker value of a color, less water. And I just keep going. And it will almost make a black. I never use black paint in my paintings. When I need a really dark, I make my own. If you wanted a warmer, like a reddier black or reddier dark, whatever, use more red. If you want it more of a greeny. Now, I can also add, if I wanted, if I want to change it up, I'll add a little blue. And I don't worry about getting my paints dirty either, because I just rinse them off with my brush. So there's a nice, really dark color that I could use for the bird's eye. And it's kind of, if you are, sample here. So you can always test it. A little water. You can always test your color on a scrap piece of paper. And that kind of has a green tint to it, which is fine because this is a makeup birdie. And I'm going to just go in and I'm going to just paint it in. This is all dry. I'm not worried about laying my hand. Another tip though, you can always, like if I'm working on a painting on this side and I don't want to muff up what's going on over here, take a paper towel and just lay your hand down so you don't drip paint or whatever. I do that a lot because I have messed up a lot of paintings by getting paint on my hand and then laying it on my paper. We're just going to put a little eye in there. And then we'll go around and paint his head and all. I'm gonna make his head kind of purpley. So I'm gonna take some of my paint, my purple paint, a little bit looser. Start up here. I'm going to rinse now and just use water. Damp brush, not drippy. And just pull that around. Now you might want to wait till that eye dries, but I'm going to just be real careful and go around it. Every now and then you got to take a step back and look over your painting. It always helps me when I walk away and come back later and really look at my painting, and that's when I go, oh gosh, I need to do something over here or work on this over here. Because when you're right on top of it for so long, sometimes you don't always see. See, look, it's getting ready to drip from my ferrule. Sometimes you don't always see things that you need to correct when you are right on top of it. Filling it in. Rinse my brush. Just use a little water. Pushing that pan around. That's my neighbor's dog. Hopefully mine will stay quiet. Okay. Let's bring some green, a little bit of my sap green, fill in some leaves here. Gosh, more neighbor dogs. If you feel when you first put some paint down, if it's too dark or too heavy, just rinse your brush and blot it. And then just use what's there to fill in the rest of your area. I always like to start lighter and work my way towards the darks. I build them up. I build up my colors. Remember, light to dark with watercolors. It's just the opposite with acrylics. You start with your darks and you work your way to your lights. Sometimes I paint more with water than anything. Just dropping in a little bit of color there onto my damp paper. Okay. And then once we get all these kind of shapes filled in, you really can leave, I mean, if there's some shapes you don't even want to put in with paint, that's fine, because you can always go in and with your darks and, you know, fill it in that way. So every little drawing that you've drawn, don't feel like you have to paint in each one. You don't have to. I'm going to take a little bit more blue. And I'm going to put some blue right up into this shape. A little water. If it starts to, too much, puddly. Now, if you put your brush down to your paper and it's like it's scraping over top the texture of your paper, that's called dry brushing. You don't have enough water on your brush or in your paints. So just add a little bit. And let's add a little bit of that orangey color right here. And I'll do it right here. I don't know what shape that is, but I'm going with it. Doesn't matter. All right, let's do its beak. Again, whatever color you want, I'll use that dark mixture I made up. Okay. I'm going to take my pink. I'm going to have my pink here. Now I rinse my brush. Careful, and I want to make that bleed into my pink, so I'm going to be real careful right there. Don't want to hit that with water. So I'm just taking my damp brush and just putting the pink in with a little bit of damp brush. And then I'm gonna darken. Don't worry, it's not gonna look that. It's gonna hit right now. His beaker's like, bam, right in your face. I'm gonna be darkening that area up. All right, a couple more little spots, and then we're going to go in and darken up some of these values. Let's take a little bit of that lemon yellow. And I'm going to take some lemon yellow and I'm going to fill in this area right here. I have this weird shape drawn, so I'm going to fill that in with my lemon yellow. And then I'm going to, and I'm kind of scanning my painting to see a balance here of colors. So I have some shapes right there, and I think I'll make a little green, make them green right here. Okay, let's go in and darken some of these colors now. You guys still hanging with me? Any questions? All right, I'm going to take my cerulean blue. Let's clean it up a little bit. I got some of that dark on there. And I'm going to make a darker value. I don't want to add as much water this time because I'm going to darken it up. Might even add a little purple to it. That's pretty. Nice dark blue. That's my brush. Let me think for a sec where I want to put it. So I now have my blues here. I have some different blue there, purple there. I really want this to stand. I'm going to start my base here, and I'm going to use my dark, start at my base, and then come up. Start at the bottom, I mean, and come up. I'm going to just, rinse my brush, blot it, and then just pick up some of that dark paint. And I'm going to start down here and just add it in. Now I'm not going to fill it all in like I'm coloring. I'm just going to add it in certain little areas. And then I'm going to use my water, rinse and blot. I'm going to use my water quickly though. I don't want it to dry. I don't want to see those hard lines where I stopped. I want it to seem seamless. And just add water. Pull some of that paint up. And you see it's like really dark at the base and then it fades out as I go up. Now I'm going to be wetting this area because I'm pulling that paint as far as I can get it. And then this area will already be wet. And then what I'm going to do is drop in more of that dark. So I'm going to drop in a little bit of that dark here. And because it's wet right now, it's going to kind of bleed out. Drop a little bit over here. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to just use my brush to help move that paint around. But I don't want to fill the whole thing in with that same value of color. I want different values throughout. All right, a little bit more. And then I just use water to help move it around. Water is your vehicle for watercolors to make things happen. So I'm going to just wet this now. I'm going to start at the base here. And add in some color. Rinse, blot. And pull that paint up. I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm going to add a little more over here. Damp brush to kind of help soften it up. Okay, this area here, I don't know if you can see. Okay, let me show you. So right here, I had a little bit of that blue bleed out earlier. And that's totally fine, because what I'm going to do is make this area really dark. And the really dark is going to help with the contrast of this and with this medium value. This right now is like a medium value. So when I put a dark there, it's going to, number one, cover those little areas and then help all this to pop even more. Okay, so for this middle section here, I'm going to darken this, but I'm not going to make it quite as dark as I did for here. Okay, so I'm going to wet this first. It just helps move things a little bit more. And I'm not worrying about it kind of bleeding over. I don't want to purposely hit this side, but I'm just going to take a little bit of water and just kind of, you know, start wetting this a little bit. And I'm going to just take a little bit on the tip of my brush. I'm going to focus it more towards the purple. I'm not going to start here. I'm going to start here. And see how it's kind of bleeding out that way? Because my paper was wet. And then I'm just going to help it with a clean, damp brush. Just make it a little bit, it's still blue, but a little bit lighter. And then what's going to happen here is we're going to get that light and dark. Make it a little bit more color. And then I rinse and just use a damp brush to help push it out. All right, now that center was purple. So I'm going to get a darker value, purple. And it's okay if that's wet. I'm going to just go in, go around my green, and add in a little bit of color like that. And then I always just, you know, I use water to move it, because you'd be surprised how much paint is when you put darker value like that or darker paint on your paper. You'd be surprised how far you can pull it out with a damp brush. And I'm keeping the base a little bit darker than the tip. And you know, you move around your painting. You can always come back and touch things up. But you gotta move around. You don't want to stay focused in one area too long. Alright, so I got some blue going on over here. This whole thing here, I didn't even paint anything in yet. So with this blue, I used a different blue. So I think what I'm going to do, I used more of a cobalt blue here, I think it was. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a little bit of this water, add a little water again here, and I'm going to take a little bit of my cobalt and just introduce a little bit of that cobalt into this blue. And then just kind of help push it around. Get a different play on colors there. And it's probably going to all kind of blend together right now, but that's alright. I can always come back later and darken things up. So I'm going to wet this. And I'm going to take a little of my Cerulean blue. I mean, my Ultramarine blue. Kind of bring it together. I don't want this to stand out on its own too much. Okay, damp brush, blend it out. Maybe a little bit of that dark, add a little bit of that in. Just kind of bring it all together. All right, we're going to let that sit. I'm going to move down to my tail a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more red into my orange. So let's clean that up a bit. Get some red there. Rinse. Get some yellow. I'm going to make a darker orangey color. Just like that, a little creamier. I'm going to go in. I'm going to wet these. Sections. Get a little bit of that paint. Start at the base here and just kind of pull it down a little bit. Just like that. Just pull it down. Don't fill the whole thing in, because then you're going to take your damp brush and pull some of that color down. If it's not enough, you can pick up some more. You just kind of have to play with it until you know, get it the way you like it. And there are ways to fix mistakes in watercolors. That's a myth. If you think you can't, you can. There's ways to lift your color. Let's say, oh gosh, I didn't like how dark that got. So then don't wait till it's completely dry. It makes it a little bit harder. Just take clean water, take your brush, you know, rub it around with your brush a little bit and blot it out. It won't come back to white, but it will lift. You can lift color with watercolors. All right, a little bit of water here. And I'm gonna add some of my darker on the top. Kind of stay away from the edge a little bit and just pull some of that color down, then rinse your brush. And if you want, add, you know, I'm telling you, this is where my intuitive comes in. I add a little yellow, just plain yellow. Because sometimes I just feel a need. So just go with your instinct. Add a little yellow to that. Let me go over to this one. Too much water. Just wet it, nice even wet. And some paint. Down. Damp brush. Maybe a little yellow over here. Now remember, it's harder to paint light over dark with watercolors. So before you make something dark, make sure that's what you want to do. Because once you can't paint like a light color over darker value or over darker paint with watercolors. I'm not happy with what's happening here, so I'm going to re-wet this a little bit. Looks too streaky. And just go in a little bit more paint. Okay, let that sit. Wet this one a little bit. That bleeds out into it a little from this guy. It's okay. And my darker. And just take a little water, pour it down. Yeah, I can always come back and tweak things later. Okay, let me go back and add a little bit of, I'm going to wet my pink here. And I'm just going to go in with a little bit of darker, or thicker, creamier, I should say, creamier pink. So whatever color you're using, wherever you're using your colors, just, darken them up by not adding as much water to your paint on your palette. I'm going to go in with a little bit of, I have a magenta here, like I used earlier. I'm going to drop a little magenta in. Kind of just dotting it in. And because it's wet, it's going to just kind of bleed out. Now I'm going to take, I'm going to use a little Hooker's green. If you don't have a dark green or only one green or don't have a green, just mix your yellows and your blues till you get the desired green if you want to use green. And, just mix them on your palette until you get the colors you want. Right now, this is all one value. They all look like they're one, it's all one thing because there's no highs and darks and lights. So I'm going to really darken this green here. So I used a really thicker, creamier paint, Hooker's green here. And now I'm just going to take a little water See, water's dripping. I'm going to take a little water and just kind of pour it out. Get a little bit more. Let's come down to this one. Add a little paint in and then finish it with water. Now what I could do also is come in between here. If I want to make more of a bluey green leaf, I would just add a little blue to my green. And that'll make it a different green. Dye a little bit of that in. But I don't want to keep them all this, you know, I'm going from one value. I don't want to keep them all the same value. I don't want to make them all really dark. I want to keep some light, some dark in there. Let's come up here, make this one dark. Connect it. And then just use a little water. It's really darker on this side. Of that leaf, and then leave this side of it a little lighter, since it's going to be up against this one, which is a little bit darker now. Let me put a little darker over here. You want to try and always have your lights against your darks. Now, you know, I can wait for this to dry even more and go back in, darken them up even more. Okay, the purple on his head, and turn this. I'm going to make darker. I'm going to start work my way. Rinse, and just use what's there. And use my damp brush. I think I'm going to throw in a little pink as well while it's wet. And then rinse, just for fun. Love when colors just blend right on the paper. It just makes it a little bit more interesting. And a little more pink here. And a little bit more purple. A little bit of water. Underneath here, I'm going to use a little bit of that magenta, and I'm going to make it fairly dark because I don't want that beak kind of floating on its own there. So I'm going to anchor it with this dark magenta. If you have a red, use a red. If you know, if you want to make a darker pink or a violet, you know, just add a little blue. More red than blue if you want more of a magenta color or a burgundy color. I'm going to just take a damp brush now. And that next to the green really helps each other stand out because they're complementary colors. You want to put a little bit of yellow in your green. You know, you just have at it. I don't know, this is what I'm saying, watercolors do take a long time because of the layering. Okay, I think I'm going to take some of that magenta and add it up here in my pinks. Get some darker value up in here. So I just add a little bit. You know, I add a little and then I just will use my damp brush to fill in the rest because I just don't want to make it a solid one value flat color. Like this yellow is flat, this purple is flat because it's just, there's no highs and lows in those colors. Wet this and then just drop a little bit of that in. Things are getting a little darker. Just takes time. Definitely not one and done with watercolors. Definitely not. So I'm just going in with my darker. I kind of focus it towards one side of that shape and then I go back with my damp brush just to soften it all up. I can tell I have a lot on my brush, so I'm just going to go over here and put it in there. All right, I'm not sure what's going on with this kind of a flower, but we're going to I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to take some of my dark blue that I made up and I'm just going to make these two right here, or these three, my main flower. I'm going to put a little center here. These two will just be some kind of leaves. Just going to improvise. So I'm going to take a little dark blue and I'm going to dot it for a center and just leave it. Now these guys, I'm going to take my dark blue that I just did here for these little dots, and I'm going to just change them a little bit. I'm going to add the blue. Just kind of the one side on that shape and then use water just to change them up a bit. A little bit more blue here. All on dry paper right now. And then rinse, blot. And just use your damp brush. Kind of pour it out. And if you need to stop, I do this a lot. I stop, take a break, and come back. Don't feel like you have to get it all done in one sitting, ever. I mean, I try and paint every day. I really do. And some days I get more frustrated than others So I just walk away and I come back later. Come back later with, you know, fresh eyes. Down a little bit more blue in here. And a little bit more here. A little damp brush. All right, I'm gonna really darken up my greens there a little bit. The green leaves while this dries a bit. So I'm gonna just get a little bit of my hooker's green. Not dark enough. Less water. And I'm just going to go up a little bit, rinse and blot, and then just hit that with a damp brush. And pull that up. Now, I feel like adding in a little bit of little yellow, golden yellow in that leaf. So I'm going to do that while it's damp. And it'll just all kind of blend together. Changed it up a bit. Over this leaf. And remember, you can start with the tip of your brush, and to get wider, just press down. And just a little water. And eventually it all comes together. I mean, I do paintings where, I mean, I have 3 or 4, 5 layers. So it takes me days to complete a painting, most of the time, depending on what's going on. So just darken this a little bit. A little water. I think I'm gonna add a little golden yellow to this one as well. Maybe right down in this area. The whole concept though of this is you want darker and lighter values in your paintings. Don't make them all light, one value. And watch when we put that dark background in, it's going to really make this whole painting pop. Darker green here. A little bit of a damp brush. All right, this flower needs a lot of help. So I'm not crazy about the color of that flower, but I don't want to change it all together. So let's see what I can do here. I'm going to take this yellow gold, which is called New Gamboge. I'm going to put it over here. Get more going. And let me see what happens when I mix this opera pink. Oh, wow. Now you're talking. This was a little boring. I should have did that from the beginning. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that, work on that, and I'm going to have to introduce this color now somewhere else. Okay, so you're still gonna see some of this color in there, but I'm gonna go in, dot my center, and then again, just kind of go on the outskirts here of my drawing lines, rinse, blot, and then pull that paint down into the petals with a damp brush. And remember, get it before it dries. Otherwise, you're going to get those hard edges. Again, outskirts of my drawing. A little bit here and there. And then a damp brush just to pull that paint away and into your petals. Soften that a bit. Okay. It's so fun to mix colors, to see all the different colors you can get just with a few paints. I mean, what do I have? 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different colors on my palette, but I could probably make 100 colors with just those colors on my palette. That's what they say. You can get every color under the rainbow with 3 primary colors, red, blue, yellow. Okay, just pulling that down and filling that in. A little to the outskirts of that drawing line, and then damp brush. So I'm just going to repeat that. You mix up a little bit more of that color. I'm just going to repeat that as I go around. Put a little more darker value there. Maybe a little more darker there. Brush gets too dry. I can tell by it getting too dry because it doesn't start to spread my paint. So I'm just going on the outskirts of that drawing line and then pull that paint out with a damp brush. Soften it up. Go ahead and darken this up a little bit. Going out here. A little bit of water. So I'm just really going over the area I've already done, but adding in that new color. And I'm constantly rinsing my brush and blotting it, and then just going in and pulling that paint out with a damp brush. I like that color a lot on my palette, so I think I'm going to take a little bit of that same mixture I just did there, and just because I can, I'm going to add a little bit to these tail feathers. That way it'll kind of harmonize it. Just a little bit on those two, right at the base, and then water. Just add a little variety of color to these. Too dry. I can tell when it starts skipping over the texture of my paper that my brush is too dry. And a little bit more. I'm going to wet this first. I'm going to add a little bit of that color. Here. Wet this. Add a little bit here. Okay. All right, I'm gonna make this a little darker green, and then I'm gonna mix up some really, really darks. I don't want you guys to have to be here forever. So I'm gonna just darken this one, and then we're gonna go into the background. And then, you know, later, if you painted this with me, later come back, look at it, and see. And then, if not, when you do your painting, and also, I would love to see what you do. Don't feel embarrassed. You know, if this is your first time, I mean, you would crack up if you saw my paintings when I first started. Crack up. They're horrible. So don't ever feel like you're too embarrassed to post something. I would love to see what you do. And don't really, honestly, I really would love to see what you do in your paintings. Don't ever feel funny about posting anything here. Actually, I need to darken this flower up a little bit. It's too one value. Okay. Now, I'm going to mix up a really dark. I'm going to show you here. So here's my palette. I use my larger brush, my number 8. And let me think for a sec. I want like a really dark purpley navy blue. So I'm going to take my Ultramarine here. Or like a really dark grayish blue. Put some over here. Okay, and then I'm going to take some purple. So I'm going to add a little bit of my Alizarin Crimson. Really, if you mix every color on your palette, you're going to get a dark. You'll just keep going. And let's get a little bit more. Let's see. My Cerulean here. I got Cobalt. I got them all. Why not? You don't want a lot of water to make your darks. Less water. Ooh, that's pretty. So I pretty much use blues, a red, and purple. Ooh, blue is my favorite color, so I can never go wrong with blue. Let me get a little more purple in there. More red. I mean, it's gonna look almost black. And then don't forget, you can all, okay. So you can always take your, see when you do this, and it looks like that, your brush is too dry and so is your paint. So what I suggest is take the tip of your brush, dip it in water, and then go back. Okay, look how dark that is. So if you get this look, you don't have enough water in your brush and or in your paint. Now remember, the more water you add to your paint, the lighter your paint color is going to be. Okay, let me get a little bit of red. It's like a nice deep purpley blue. Love that. And that's what I'm going to do in my background. So try to mix up enough color that you don't have to keep going back and remixing color. And what also helps, excuse me, a lot of times when I'm doing a certain color that I want, I'll write down what colors I used. That way I don't forget. You know, oh gosh, I mixed up. What colors should I use to make that color? So, you know, it kind of helps to write it down as well. I mean, there's so much to learn with watercolors. Okay, I'm gonna pull my camera down a little bit closer now so you guys can see what I'm doing really close. Okay. I probably should have did that to begin with. All right, I'm going to take my number 4, and I'm going to go in between. I'm not sure what to do. This is fairly dark here, so I don't want to put another dark against that. So you know what? I think I'm going to, I'm gonna fill this in here with that first orangey color that I used here, just a lighter value, just to get something there, because I don't want to make this is already sort of dark, and I don't want to add a really dark there. It just will not. I'll leave a little space here to add some dark in there, but whatever this shape is, my drawing was way different from the traceable. So I'm just going to add this kind of yucky color. And then I'm going to just blend that out right there. Leave a little bit of a gap by that yellow so I can add some dark. Remember, dark against lights. In my membership group, you can cancel any time. No contracts, nothing. Okay, so let's let that sit. I'm going to go to my number 4 round. And I might even, you know, after we get off here, I might even work on this a little bit more. I'm not crazy about this either, but that's okay. All right, I'm getting my darks. My dark here. See how it's already starting to dry? It's not moving at all on my palette. That's how little water I have in it. You do need a little bit, though, to get it moving. You can't, you know, you don't want it totally dry. It's not going to move or it's not going to go on your paper if it's totally dry. So I'm going to just take a little bit of that. I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to just work my way as best I can in between my petals, flowers, whatever I got going on here. And this is the time where if you've gone out or you muffed and you got some paint where you didn't want to, this is the time you can go in and correct that and clean up all your lines. Now, I'm going to switch brushes. This is too small for that area. I mean, too large. Use this, you know, use the brush that is proper for the area. So this is a small, tiny area. I'm going to use like a number 2. So if you don't have tiny ones, it's okay. Just use the very, very tip point of your brush. You know, just get it in there. I'll move to a larger one in larger areas. This is not the best. And just kind of really I mean, if I happen to color one in by accident and totally take it out, it's okay too, really. It's all learning. It's all learning experience. Get a little more paint. And if you find it's not moving, this brush stinks. I got some bristles going out that way. Not good. I don't like this brush. Ugh. I don't like it. Let me get another one. Okay. This one looks a little better. Remember, lighter to darker. You can always go darker. It's harder to go lighter. Before I was injured, I was a hairstylist. I mean, years ago. And I used to, you know, they would come in, oh, I'm going to cut 6 inches. Okay, you sure? Yeah. Well, why don't we start with like 3? Because we can always cut more off. Can't put it back. So I'm just going in. See that? Look. See how it's scraping across my paper? My brush is not wide enough. Dip the tip in the water, grab a little more paint, a little bit more water. Water, I'm telling you, water is your vehicle here to make your paint smooth. I'm going to kind of outline it. And this is where you just take your time. Small brushes like this, they don't hold a lot of paint or water. So you gotta kind of keep going back in. All right, I'm gonna switch brushes now. Number 4. Round. And if you find it's not moving, just add a little water to the tip of your brush. And later on, if you find that it's too light, just go back over it. Like right here, looks a little bit lighter, but I can let it dry and I can go back over it. Really, it's just kind of like filling in the rest of the puzzle here. My sun's starting to come in. I sit in front of a window, and the back of our house here faces the west.
So I'm just continuing to work my way around these petals with my really dark blue paint, bluish purple paint. Sorry for that sun glare. Just take your time with this. Use your smallest round that you have, that you're most comfortable with. You don't have to have the exact sizes I have. You can use a numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you have and whatever you're comfortable with.
But it's really helped, you know, the darks really, really do help. Oh, look at that sun. All right, hang on. I got a board here. See if I can block it a little bit. Oh, yeah. Okay. The dark really helps things to pop out. So just remember, it's all about values, your dark and light colors, which are their values, and contrasts. Darks against the lights. Like I said, color is always the superstar in a painting, but the contrast does all the work. So I'm just going in all my little empty spaces here with that dark blue. Now, if you want to use a different color to mix up a different color, you could use whatever, you know, whatever you'd like. Play around with your colors. Mix them, so you know, like I'm looking up on my screen here. Definitely need some over there, some dark. So I'm going to think before I act. Think about what I want to do to bring some dark over there. And you kind of do want to plan out your paintings. You don't want to fly from the seat of your pants. I do sometimes, but you really shouldn't. I'm going to just kind of, too dry. I'm going to kind of take up some of that leaf space. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just outline this. Bring it in a little. Kind of pull it together. Now, I don't have a steady, I lean my arm on my table when I'm doing really controlled things like this. So don't worry about it if you're not real steady. Lean your arm. And I'm looking at it, you know what? Too plain going on right here. So what I might do later, darken up these blues a little bit, maybe, and add a little pink or something right here. So you can always come back and assess your paintings. Change certain things out. Now, because this is so light in here, I can add a darker. So I just couldn't go over this with light, like yellow. It's not going to show up. But you can always go darker.
So I'm really just taking my time here, being very intentional with my brush strokes and where I'm placing my color.
Basically here, I'm just going to do the same thing. Just going over, filling in a negative space here. And I'll probably go back and outline that. Taking my time. Comes the sun. It's hard for me to paint in the afternoons, late in the afternoons, unless I go to a different table because of that sun. And I'm in Florida, so that is bright. It's bright. Okay, almost done here. I'm going to switch brushes because I'm getting a little smaller area. And you know, if you're not really familiar with watercolors, maybe practice a little bit with your paints on a piece of paper with different amounts of water. Get the feel for it a little bit. This kind of painting is so not normally what I do, but because it's so controlled and intricate, which is fine. I mean, it's pretty, you know. It's just I'm usually more looser, a little bit looser. Anyway, lately though, I don't know. I've been going back and forth, but you know, usually I like to use a lot more water and let things really, really bleed on my paper. And this is really intricate work. But when you're just starting, it's a little bit easier. This, you know, doing it like this. And don't forget, you can always use just the tip of your brush. You can press down and use the belly of the brush. Get water strokes. Where I have my colors have bled out from here before out to the white. Now I'm just able to cover all that up with my darker paint. And this brush don't want to pick up anything. A lot of water really helps. All right, this green right here, I feel is too light. I'm gonna make that green a little darker. So I'm gonna just take some green that I already have on my palette right here, add a little water to it, get it moving a little bit more. And I'm gonna really darken that one leaf under there. So I'm just gonna add a little bit in like that. I'm not gonna paint the whole thing in solid yet. And I'm gonna rinse my brush, blot it, and just pull that paint down with my damp brush. I just felt like that green needed to be a little darker. And then what I'm gonna do here is take a little bit of my dark blue. I should wait till that dries, but I'm not. I'm going to put a little bit of my dark blue down in this area here, kind of in between. And that blue is going to bleed into my green a little bit, but I'm going to control that. Just a clean, damp brush, just kind of control that. One last thing, I'm going to take a little bit of my dark blue on my little brush here. And I'm going to come on the back of maybe a quarter way down on his head. Come back towards the back. Add a little water, too much. And just come right down into that pink with that dark blue. And just fade it out. I don't want to make it solid. I just want to fade it out now with just water. So it just has a little variation of value in his head. And a little bit more water. This blue here is really light. I'm going to just take a little bit of my cobalt blue, pretty bright blue. And just add a little bit and then just use a damp brush. Blend it out. Just kind of brighten that up a little bit. And I'm gonna call this one done for right now. I might come back and combine this with my dark blue. I have to sit on it and think about it for a little bit, and I might add a little pink here. So I'm gonna, I gotta kind of walk away from it and come back, and then that's when it'll really hit me what I need to do. I might need to add a little bit darker purple values here to separate my petals a little bit more. Yeah, it looks a little light, but so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna walk away. This blue, now that it's drying, is very too light compared to these. So I'll have to go back in and darken those. but it's good to walk away sometimes. Don't try to get it all done in one sitting. It's good to walk away and then come back, and that's when you'll say, oh yeah, I need to do this or that. So like my purple here, I need to be darker. So that's what I mean, like with watercolors, you really have to, it's so many layers, you know, to get those values and contrasts in your painting. Otherwise, it's just everything's going to be real light and pale and nothing's going to stand out. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this Hummingbird tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the group. And I would love to see if you complete this painting and what you did with it. So thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of the day.